Each person plays a role in the society, so does other organisms in the environment. Like what one of the seven environmental principles states, all forms of life are important. I am Desiree Salem. Together with my group mates, we will be tackling conditions and resources. So, physical conditions and the availability of resources. Bago tayo magsimula sa lesson natin ngayong araw, so may simple icebreaker muna tayo to at least give you an idea of what our lesson for today will be. So let's figure this out. Each slide will show you jumbled letters and your task is to rearrange the letters to create a word. To help you, each slide will show you images as your clue. So the task is simple. We will display jumbled letters and you just have to rearrange the word. So let's go. Okay, so since tapos na tayo sa icebreaker or sa simple game natin, yung mga words and yung mga words na na-encounter natin is magagamit or ma-encounter din natin sa lesson natin ngayon. So for our objectives, at the end of the lesson, learners will be able to define physical conditions and resources in an ecosystem or environment and its relationship with each other. Discuss how the availability of resources like food, water, space, and nutrients influences the survival and growth of organisms. And lastly, examine how physical conditions can affect the distribution and resources in ecosystems. So, proceed na tayo sa lesson natin for today. In any ecosystem, life is strongly influenced by the interplay between environmental conditions, the availability of essential resources, and ecological niche. Examining the influence of these factors on both autotrophs and heterotrophs provides a clearer understanding of ecosystem dynamics and the processes that maintain ecological balance, dictating how organisms survive, interact, and coexist. So in our lesson for the day, simple lang naman ang itatakal natin. So ano nga bang relasyon ng conditions, essential resources, and ecological niches ng organisms? Paano nakaka-epekto ang bawat abiotic factors sa essential resources ng bawat organism, which is food, or any resources that provide them energy. So, paano rin nakaka-apekto ang bawat resources or ang bawat conditions sa ecological niches or sa ecological roles ng bawat organism. So, for our key terms in this lesson, our key terms is environmental conditions, resources, and ecological niche. For our first reporter reporting environmental conditions is Ms. Corpus and Ms. Maulawin.
So, good day everyone. Today I will discuss environmental conditions or ang ating first subtopic for this topic. And what are environmental conditions? These are factors in the environment that affect how organisms live. Meaning, these conditions influence kung paano sila nabubuhay, lumalaki, nagpaparami at nakikipag-interact sa ibang organisms. So, important din malaman na organisms do not consume these conditions. For example, hindi naman kinakain ng animals ang temperature or humidity. Pero, malaki pa din ang epekto nito sa survival nila. And every organism also has something called a tolerance range. Ibig sabihin, may limit lang ang conditions na kaya nilang tiisin. Kapag masyadong extreme ang environment, organisms may experience stress o kaya naman death. So, abiotic environmental factors. Most environmental conditions are called abiotic factors, meaning non-living parts of the environment. These abiotic factors are grouped into 4 categories. First category ay yung atmospheric and meteorological conditions. Next is yung physical and structural conditions. Third is natural resources and ecological conditions. And lastly, chemical and biological conditions. So, ang mga factors nito ay nag-help para ma-determine kung saan pwedeng tumira ang organisms at kung anong klaseng habitat ang bagay sa kanila. For example, may mga plants na mas okay sa full sunlight, tapos yung iba naman mas gusto sa shaded areas. And para sa ating first category, which is yung atmospheric and meteorological conditions, ito yung mga conditions na mas related sa weather and climate. So, kasama dito yung temperature, humidity, wind, precipitation, and air quality. And these conditions directly affect how organisms function and survive in their environment. So, para sa first nating example sa atmospheric and meteorological conditions ay ang temperature. So, temperature is the degree of heat in the environment. Nakaka-apekto ito sa metabolism, enzyme activity, at growth ng mga organisms. So, kapag, example, kapag sobrang init ng panahon, napapansin natin na parang mas mabilis tayong mapagod at saka ma-dehydrate. So, ganun din yung mga animals and plants. Kapag masyadong mataas o mababa ang temperature, pwede silang ma-stress. At saka yung isa pang example is yung ice cream. Yung ice cream, kapag nasa labas yung ice cream, mas matutunaw siya ng mas mabilis rather than kapag nasa loob siya. So, pinapakita nito na ang temperature ay nakaka-apekto sa mga biological processes. Next is ang humidity. So, humidity is the amount of water vapor in the air. So, it affects processes like evaporation and plant transpiration. So, kapag maalinsangan yung panahon, di ba, yung feeling na parang malagkit yung hangin tsaka yung pawis na pawis ka kahit di ka gumagalaw. So, ayun, humidity yung responsible doon. So, sa plants naman, kapag mataas ang humidity, mas mabagal nawawalan ng water yung mga leaves nila. Next ay yung wind. So, yung wind, it refers to the movement of air across the Earth's surface. And it helps with seed dispersal, pollination, and temperature regulation. For example, kapag may malakas na hangin, at nakikita natin na lumilipad yung mga dahon o kaya yung mga seeds, it's actually helping plants spread to other places. So, isa pang example is yung kahit mainit yung araw, kapag mahangin yung place, is mas comfy pa rin yung pakiramdam natin kasi nga mahangin. So, ayun nga, temperature regulation. Next naman ay yung precipitation. Precipitation is the water falling from the atmosphere or tulad ng rain, snow, sleet, or hail. So, since nasa tropical country tayo, ang most common na precipitation natin ay yung rain or yung ulan. And rain is very important kasi it provides water for plants, animals, and ecosystems. Kapag ilang araw na walang ulan, mapapansin natin na natutuyo yung ground, yung lupa, at nalalanta yung mga plants. Pero kapag umulan, nagiging fresh ulit sila or like hindi na sila lanta. Next is yung air quality. So, ang air quality naman is the amount of pollutants and gases present in the air. Kapag poor ang air quality, pwede itong makaapekto sa respiratory health ng humans and animals. So, kapag, example, kapag dumaan ka sa busy highway na maraming sasakyan, minsan may usok na mabigat sa ilong at parang mas mahirap huminga. So, kapag, isa pa is yung mostly kapag nasa Manila tayo is iba yung air quality dun, 'di ba? So, napapansin natin na ang init-init na kahit na iisa lang yung country na ginagalawan natin. So, pagdating natin dito sa Lukban, iba yung air quality, mas fresh siya. And so, yung plants naman, it can also be affected by air quality kasi gawa ng pollution na pwedeng mag-damage sa leaves nila and sa growth nila. Next is yung second category naman natin, which is the physical and structural conditions. These are the physical characteristics of the environment that affect organism survival. So, mga example nito yung light intensity, noise intensity, geographic features, and radiation. So, sa first is yung light intensity. It is the amount of sunlight na available sa ating environment. So, sunlight is very important because plants use it for photosynthesis to produce food. And kapag may halaman na nilagay mo near the window, usually mas healthy siya at mas mabilis siya lumaki compared dun sa mga nasa loob. Next is yung noise intensity. Noise intensity is the level of sound in the environment. Too much noise can affect communication, behavior, and stress levels of animals. Kapag nakatira ka sa airport or highway, halos lagi kang may narinig na ingay dahil dun sa mga landing at saka pag flight ng mga airplane. So, yung mga animals nakaka-experience din ito. Yung birds, ina-avoid nila yung very noisy areas because it becomes harder for them to communicate. So, mostly yung mga birds, diba, is mas nakikita natin sila sa mga forest, ganyan, kasi doon mas tahimik and mas nakakapag-communicate sila. Next is yung geographic features. Geographic features includes mountains, valleys, altitudes, slopes, and bodies of water. These features influence local climate and habitats. So, example, yung mga lugar na malapit sa ocean ay mas cooler siya because of the sea breeze. And isa pang example naman is yung mga mountain areas like Baguio kasi mas malamig siya kaysa sa lowland kasi mas mataas yung altitude niya. And then, lastly, para sa ating second category is yung radiation. So, ang radiation, it includes solar radiation, ultraviolet rays, and other electromagnetic radiation. The most common example is yung sunlight galing sa ating sun. And sunlight is necessary for life. Pero kapag masyado ng expose ay magiging harmful ito sa atin. Example, kapag masyado tayong matagal sa araw, pwede tayong magkaroon ng sunburn or heat exhaustion.
Good day everyone! I am Lian Armaulawin at ngayon naman po, let's tackle natural resources and ecological conditions. So ito po ay tumutukoy sa mga environmental conditions na related sa natural elements tulad ng water, soil, nutrients at living organisms na sumusuporta sa life and ecosystem processes. Sa madaling salita, ito yung mga likas na factors sa environment na nakakaapekto kung paano nabubuhay, nag-grow, at nagsusurvive ang mga organisms sa isang ecosystem. So, una po ay ang water availability. Ito ay ang dami ng accessible na tubig sa isang environment na kailangan ng organisms para mabuhay. Mahalaga ang tubig dahil ginagamit ito sa metabolism, photosynthesis at nutrient transport ng plants at animals. Kapag kulang ang tubig, nahihirapan ng organisms na mabuhay at mag-function ng maayos sa ecosystem. So sa picture po, makikita natin ng isang wetland ecosystem na may iba't ibang organisms tulad ng ibon, isda at halaman na lahat ay nakadepende sa tubig. Pinapakita nito na kapag may sapat na water availability, mas maraming organisms ang kayang mabuhay sa isang lugar. Pero kapag nagkaroon ng drought o kakulungan sa tubig, bababa ang biodiversity at maapektuhan ang buong ecosystem. Sunod naman po ay ang soil and nutrient availability. Ito ay tumutukoy sa minerals at nutrients na nasa lupa na tumutulong sa paglaki ng plants. Kapag may sapat na nutrients ang soil, mas healthy ang plant growth at mas stable ang ecosystem dahil ang plants ang primary producers na sumusuporta sa food chain. So sa image po, makikita natin na kung paano ina-absorb ng roots ang waters at minerals mula sa soil. Makikita rin ang process ng photosynthesis kung saan ginagamit ng plants ang nutrients, tubig at sunlight para makagawa ng food. Ipinapakita nito na ang soil at nutrients ay mahalaga hindi lang sa plants kundi sa buong ecosystem dahil dito nagsisimula ang energy flow. Next po ay vegetation and biodiversity. So, ito ay ang variety ng plants at living organisms sa isang ecosystem. So, ang vegetation ay nagbibigay ng food, shelter, at habitat sa iba't ibang species kaya mas nagiging stable at balanced ang ecosystem kapag mataas ang biodiversity. So, sa unang image, makikita natin ang dense vegetation o maraming halaman sa isang ecosystem. Kapag marami ang vegetation, mas maraming organisms ang pwedeng tumira dahil may sapat na pagkain at tirahan. Sa pangalawang image naman, makikita ang iba't ibang animals na kumakatawan sa biodiversity. Ipinapakita nito na ang variety ng species ay nakakatulong sa stability ng ecosystem dahil bawat organisms ay may role sa ecological balance. Ngayon naman po, lilipat tayo sa chemical and biological conditions. Ito ay tumutukoy sa mga environmental factors na may kinalaman sa chemical composition at biological interaction sa loob ng ecosystem. So, ibig sabihin, hindi lang physical factors tulad ng tubig at lupa ang mahalaga kundi pati ang chemical factors tulad ng pH, salinity, oxygen, at pati na rin ang mga living organisms na nakakaapekto sa ecosystem balance. So, ang pH level ay ang sukatan kung gaano ka-acidic o ka-alkaline ang soil o tubig sa isang environment. So malaki ang epekto nito sa nutrient availability at survival ng organisms. Halimbawa, kung sobrang acidic o sobrang alkaline ng tubig o lupa, mahihirapan ang plants at animals na mabuhay dahil hindi nila maayos na ma-absorb ang nutrients na kailangan nila. So kapag sinabi nating acidic, ibig sabihin nun mababa ang pH, mas maasim o mataas ang acidity. Alkaline naman means mataas ang pH, mas basic o less acidic ang environment. Kapag neutral naman, ibig sabihin pH 7, so ibig sabihin balance lang yun. Sa image po, makikita natin ang iba't ibang organisms at ang minimum pH level na kaya nilang i-tolerate. Halimbawa, may mga isda at aquatic organisms na nangangailangan ng specific pH range para mabuhay. Ipinapakita nito na hindi lahat ng organisms ay kayang mag-survive sa parehong pH level. Kapag nagbago ang pH ng tubig, maaaring mamatay o mawala ang ibang species sa ecosystem. Sunod naman po ay ang salinity. Ang salinity ay ang concentration ng dissolved salt sa tubig o soil. Nakakaapekto ito sa water balance at osmoregulation ng organisms o kung paano nila kinokontrol ang tubig sa kanilang katawan. Kapag hindi angkop or tama ang salinity, mahihirapan ng organisms na mag-survive sa environment na yon. So sa image po, makikita ang dalawang uri ng aquatic environment, freshwater at marine. Ang freshwater tulad ng lakes, streams at rivers ay may low salinity, habang ang marine environment tulad ng oceans at coral reefs ay may high salinity. Ibig sabihin, ang mga freshwater organisms ay hindi basta-basta mabubuhay sa dagat, at ang marine organisms naman ay hindi rin mabubuhay sa freshwater. Katulad po nitong mga nasa figure na nakikita natin. Kaya po, ang salinity ay isang important factor na nagdidikta kung anong species ang matatagpuan natin sa isang ecosystem. Next naman po ay ang oxygen concentration. Ito ay ang dami ng oxygen na available sa hangin o dissolved sa tubig. Mahalaga ito dahil kailangan ng oxygen para sa cellular respiration ng living organisms. Kung mababa ang oxygen level, mahihirapan ng organisms na mag-produce ng energy at maaaring mamatay ang iba, lalo na ang aquatic organisms tulad ng isda. Sa image po, makikita natin ang iba't ibang aquatic organisms at ang oxygen requirements nila. May mga isda na nangangailangan ng mataas na oxygen level tulad nitong trout, habang ang ibang organisms naman tulad ng bacteria ay kayang mabuhay kahit mababa ang oxygen. Ipinapakita nito na ang oxygen concentration ay directly nakakaapekto sa survival at distribution ng organisms sa ecosystem. Next naman po ay ang biological factors. Ito ay tumutukoy sa mga living components sa ecosystem tulad ng pests, insects, at disease carriers. Ang mga ito ay maaaring makaapekto sa ecosystem balance dahil nakakaapekto sila sa population ng plants, animals, at ibang organisms. So sa slide na ito, makikita ang examples ng biological factors. So sa unang image po ay pest na sumisira sa plants at crops, kaya bumababa ang plant productivity sa ecosystem. Sa ikalawang image naman po ay insects na maaaring maging beneficial o harmful depende sa role nila sa environment. At ang pangatlong image naman ay vector-borne diseases, tulad ng lamok na nagdadala ng sakit na maaaring makaapekto hindi lang sa tao kundi pati sa ecosystem health. So, ipinapakita nito na ang living organisms ay may malaking epekto sa ecological balance dahil sila ay nakikipag-interact sa isa't isa sa loob ng ecosystem. So, ang pests ay kumakain ng plants kaya naaapektuhan ng plant growth. Ang insects naman ay maaaring maging beneficial tulad ng pollinators o harmful kung sila ay nagiging pest nga. Samantala, ang vector-borne diseases tulad ng lamok ay nagdadala ng pathogens na maaaring magdulot ng sakit sa ibang organisms. Ipinapakita nito na ang mga organisms ay magkakaugnay at may epekto sa balanse ng ecosystem. So, sa lahat ng environmental conditions na napag-usapan natin, tulad ng water availability, nutrients, pH, salinity, oxygen, at biological factors ay nakakaapekto sa tolerance range ng organisms. Ibig sabihin, bawat species ay may limit kung saan lang sila kayang mabuhay, mag-grow, at mag-reproduce. Kapag lumagpasalibot tayo ng kondisyon ng environment, maaaring ma-stress o mabawasan ang population o mamatay ang organisms. So, sa kabuuan, ang natural resources, chemical conditions at biological factors ay nagdidikta ng survival at distribution ng organism sa ecosystem. So kapag stable ang environmental conditions, nagiging balance ang ecosystem. Pero kapag nagbago ang mga kondisyong ito, naapektuhan ang buhay ng mga organisms at ang overall ecosystem stability.
Hi, ako po si Joshua L. Falier at atin naman pong pag-uusapan ang resources and photosynthetic organisms. So, first, ano nga ba ang resources? So, basically, ito ang mga bagay o supply ng mga materials na kinakailangan ng mga organismo para mabuhay. Ito ay mga bagay na kinokonsumo o ino-occupy ng mga organismo. Lahat ng supply ng resources ay may limit, kaya nagkakaroon ito ng competition. Pero lagi nating tandaan na ang pag-consume ng resources ay hindi lamang ibig sabihin ay pagkain, maaari rin itong tumutukoy sa pag-occupy o paggamit ng isang bagay tulad ng space o area na titirhan bilang mga organismo o consumer, ginagamit o ino-occupy natin ang mga resources na ito upang matirhan at mabuhay. Ngayon naman ay ang photosynthetic organism. So alam naman natin ang mga photosynthetic organism na ito ay may kakayahang mag-photosynthesis. Ang pinakakaraniwang halimbawa nito ay ang mga halaman o plants na madalas nating makita sa labas. Bukod sa plants, kabilang din dito ang mga algae o phytoplanktons at mga cyanobacterias. Ang mga organisms na ito ay may abilidad na gumawa ng sariling pagkain sa pamamagitan ng photosynthesis. Kaya tinatawag silang photosynthetic organisms. Mahalaga sila dahil gumagamit sila ng resources tulad ng energy mula sa araw at mga inorganic substances. At kino-convert nila ito sa usable organic compounds. Ito ay nagiging beneficial sa ibang organisms na kukonsumo sa kanila. Halimbawa ay mga herbivores or primary consumers. Tulad natin, ngayon ay atin namang pinaka-focus ay kung ano-ano nga ba yung mga resources ng photosynthetic organisms. Kabilang dito yung mga solar radiation or yung light, carbon dioxide, water at mineral nutrients. Kasama na din dito, isama na natin yung space. So, una yung solar radiation or yung light. So, yung pinakamahalagang resource para sa proseso ng photosynthesis. Dahil kung walang light, hindi makakagawa ng pagkain ng mga plants. At dahil dito, maaaring maapektuhan ng ibang organismo. Kabilang na tayo doon. Kaya sa madaling salita, ang light ang nag-fuel ng ecosystem natin. Dahil ang photosynthetic organism ang nag-convert ng energy mula sa araw upang maging organic matter na nagiging pagkain o energy source ng ibang organismo. Ginagamit ng mga plants ang light energy para sa kanilang life processes, lalo na sa pag-convert ng inorganic substances tulad ng carbon dioxide at water upang makagawa ng organic compounds. At gayon pa man, dahil iba't ibang species ng photosynthetic organisms ang nag-uumiral, mayroon din silang iba't ibang tolerance ng light intensity. Ayon sa pag-aaral ni Wenyu Wanwu na may pamagat na The Role of Light in Regulating Plant Growth, Development, and Sugar Metabolism. Ipinapakita na ang light resource ay nagre-regulate ng plant growth, development, metabolism, at stress response mechanism. At ang ibig sabihin nito ay ang intensity ng sunlight ay may malaking epekto sa life processes ng plants at posibleng ganoon din sa ibang photosynthetic organisms. Dahil dito, may mga species na mas nabubuhay o mas nagpa-perform sa low light. Sila yung tinatawag na xerophytes, habang iba naman ay mas nangangailangan na high light intensity or heliophytes sila. Pwede din natin itong i-compare sa larong Plant vs. Zombies, alam naman natin yon. Halimbawa, ang heliophytes o mga photosynthetic organism na adapted sa high light intensity ay parang mga plants na nakatanim sa maaraw na area. So, tulad ng pea shooter, kapag may sapat na sunlight, nagfa-function siya at nag-shoot ng peas laban sa zombies. Ngayon, isipin natin, ano ang mangyayari kapag nilagay natin yung pea shooter sa night? So, di ba, matutulog sila at hindi magfa-function. So, ibig sabihin nito, hindi siya adapted sa low light condition. Ganito rin sa totoong buhay. Ang heliophytic plants ay mas nabubuhay sa high light, habang ang sessiophilic o shade-adapted plants ay mas nabubuhay sa low-light environments at mas maaaring mas stress kapag masyadong mataas ang light intensity. So ngayon naman ay carbon dioxide na isa rin sa mahalagang resources na kinakailangan sa photosynthesis. Ginagamit ito ng mga plants at ibang photosynthetic organism upang makagawa ng sugar at iba pang organic matter tulad ng carbohydrates na nagsisilbing food at energy source nila. Sa prosesong ito, nagpo-produce din sila ng oxygen bilang byproduct. At napag-aralan naman din natin na ang carbon cycle ng prelims, ang photosynthetic organism ay kumukuha ng carbon dioxide mula sa atmosphere na kung saan sila ay pinaka-abundant doon, di ba? Tapos bukod dito, maaari din silang makakuha ng carbon dioxide mula sa respiration ng ibang organismo like gas exchange. Tapos dahil ang resources ay may limit, nagkakaroon din ng iba't ibang adaptation ng photosynthetic organism para sa pagkuha at paggamit ng carbon dioxide. Napag-aralan natin ito sa botany. So tulad ito ng crussellation acid metabolism, yung CAM, C3 at C4 pathways sa plants, samantala sa cyanobacteria at algae, meron silang carbon concentrating mechanism, CCM, na tumutulong upang mas effective nilang makuha at magamit ang carbon dioxide para sa photosynthesis.
Good day, everyone. I'm Sweet Abran Binay, and we're going to continue the types of resources of photosynthetic organism na na-discuss na ni Mr. Pallier. As we already tackled the solar radiation and carbon dioxide, let's proceed to the water. As we know, water ay isa sa pinaka-importanting resource ng isang organism. Kapatao, hayop, or most of the biotic factors need water to survive. To relate it in plants, based on what we learned in botany, we found out that water is used in plants, especially during photosynthesis. They use the water to release the oxygen, or the water molecules are split into an oxygen, mga electrons, and hydrogen ions. Nagkakaroon din ng times na merong tertiary pressure kung saan pag di sila nadidiligan ay yung vacuoles nila is nag-shrink or magdadry out na nagre-result to be wilting. Next naman is mineral nutrients. Ito naman yung mga nutrients na na-absorb ng plants on our soils. Yung mga soils kasi pwede siyang maging factor kung magiging maganda ba yung plant kasi doon nga nila nakukuha yung nutrients that are important for them tulad ng mga protein. Based na rin sa naging activity natin sa ecology lab, yung sa Collis Blumey or yung Mayana, even though same yung pinagkukunan namin ng halaman ng isang group, iba yung naging result namin after several months of taking care of it. The other group, unfertilized, have a flower on their Mayana. Meanwhile, my group have a larger leaves na parang yung naging factors nga nito is yung mineral nutrients. Yun yung parang naging factors ng differences namin. Yung last type naman ay yung space. Hindi man halata but space where in the plant is located is also considered as a resource. Pag kasi nakoconsume ng isang plant yung isang malawak na space, pwede niya maapektuhan yung other plants or mag-cause ng competition sa pag-absorb ng mga nutrients sa light at sa water. In analogy, may nagpanabog ng pera. Then nakapwesto kayo ng barkada mo sa kalat na parte kung saan may magpapanabog ng pera. Yun bang pwesto na maganda na may tendency na kayo-kayo lang yung mas may makakakuha compare sa ibang participants? As a participants, di ba parang magiging unfair naman siya sa atin or sa amin kasi mas makukuha nga nung barkadang yun yung mga napanabog na pera. Dito sa space kasi dapat maayos or organized yung pagkakapwesto ng isang halaman para pag ma-absorb na ay hindi tayo magkakaroon ng agawan at lamangan. In overall nitong resource for photosynthesis organism, malalaman natin yung mga resources na kinakailangan nila para ma-convert nila ito to become their energy.
So for our third subtopic for today, once again I am Dasirjit A. Salem, and I will be reporting this with Miss Lorena. So heterotrophs and their resources. So first of all, the term stems from the Greek words hetero, meaning other, and trophe, meaning nourishment. In simple terms, other nourishment, which means heterotrophs are organisms that need other organisms for nourishment. So in the food chain, which is a series of species that give other organisms energy, and nutrients, and heterotrophs are found at the second or third levels. So, three trophic levels, which characterize an organism's function in an ecosystem, make up each food chain. So, what is a food chain? The process by which matter and energy are transferred from one organism to another in the form of food. Since most species eat more than one kind of plant or animal, food chains locally converge to form a food web. So simply, food chains are more simple than food webs because food chains are usually a straight line or a simple circle that shows a process of how energy is transferred. So it usually just shows one organism for each consumer part. So this is an example of a food chain. So the plant being the producer or autotroph, and the grasshopper being the primary consumer, bird the secondary consumer, the snake tertiary consumer, and an apex predator which is a bird or an eagle. So there are also decomposers which are fungi. So ang role ng decomposers ay binabalik nila yung nutrients sa soil to be able to be used by the autotrophs or the plants once again. So simply looking at our food chain, so the producers which provides energy for herbivores or also omnivores actually. So herbivores and omnivores are types of heterotrophs that eat plants. So the bird is usually an omnivore which can eat both autotrophs and both heterotrophs. A snake being usually only a carnivore which only eats one or more organisms, which is usually a heterotroph. So next is the food web. So a food web is a complicated network of overlapping and connected food chains that illustrates the feeding relationships within a community. A food web depicts how food chains interact within an ecosystem, while a food chain demonstrates the movement of substance and energy from food from one organism to another. So, simply speaking, food webs are food chains or connected food chains or overlapping food chains. So, balik tayo sa food chain natin kanina. So, as you can see sa food chain natin kanina, it's only a circle or isa lang yung pinapakita niyang organisms per part. So, sa food web, it shows different organisms which can also use this organism to provide energy. So, makikita natin sa food web kung paano nga ba nag-interact ang bawat organism to challenge each other to get resources or to get the resources they need. So, this is an example of a food web. So, as you can see, it's more complex compared to a food chain. So, the plant that can be eaten by different species such as grasshopper, mouse, and rabbit. As you can see, there are different arrows providing knowledge on who can eat other organisms. So as you can see, berries and plants are autotrophs which can produce their own energy, while rabbits, grasshopper, mouse, and a butterfly are heterotrophs that are classified as herbivores, which only eats autotrophs. So bird, snake, vulture, fox, frog, they usually eat other organisms to be able to function for their everyday living.
So, the energy pyramid shows the different trophic levels and which organisms reside in each trophic level. Now, though there are more than just three, for now we're going to discuss the primary producers, the primary consumers, and the secondary consumers. So, let us discuss them right now. The first trophic level is made up of primary producers, aka autotrophs. In the majority of cases, these are the largest trophic level, though in some cases, like parasites infecting a host, they can be outnumbered by the other trophic levels. And autotrophs, as we all know, also produce their own food and nutrients. Next, the second trophic level, it is made up of primary consumers, also known as herbivores. they are known as primary consumers because they're the ones that mainly eat the primary producers. Um, they are then consumed by the third trophic level, carnivores and omnivores, which are known as the secondary consumers. Now, what happens when a carnivore or an omnivore, aka secondary consumers, dies? Well, to know that, let us discuss detritivores. You might recognize the root word detritus, meaning dead organic matter. Basically, these are also called decomposers, and they're a kind of heterotrophic consumers, right? As it says here, fecal waste and the remains of plants and animals are the sources of nourishment for these organisms, and they essentially recycle trash. So, by consuming fecal matter, they basically turn it into usable nutrients for autotrophs to, continue the cycle of life, and in doing so, keep the nature in order. Now, a quick reminder on what a heterotroph is. Unlike an autotroph, it cannot manufacture its own food. So, as you can see, the detritivores are a kind of heterotrophic consumer. There are two other types of heterotrophs as well that we will discuss right now. These are the two subcategories of heterotrophs. There's the photoheterotrophs and the chemoheterotrophs. Now, photoheterotrophs, from the part of the word there, photo, meaning light, you can tell that these organisms obtain their energy from light because they're not able to use carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere. Now, an example of this would be cyanobacteria and spheroides. There are a lot of bacteria that actually fit into this type of photoheterotrophs as well. Now, here we go to chemoheterotrophs. Unlike photoheterotrophs, they can obtain carbon and their energy from other living things, which are basically autotrophs or, just other places. Basically, all animals are a good example of chemoheterotrophs. But for now, we will focus on a specific chemoheterotroph in a moment. As you can see, we can see here herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and detritivores are all examples of chemoheterotrophs. And here are the examples of photoheterotrophs. The purple non-sulfur bacteria, green non-sulfur bacteria, heliobacteria, and the other ones I mentioned earlier, cyanobacteria, and also spheroides. And here it is, the chemoheterotroph I mentioned earlier that we will be focusing on, Bubalus bubalis. So we know this beautiful animal as a kalabaw or carabao. They are herbivores that graze on grass, leaves, tree bark. They feed on a lot of things as a herbivore, and they mostly live in marshes or tropical areas. Now, they can be impacted severely by different conditions like water availability, seasonal changes, habitat structure, temperature, drought. Now, they're mainly affected by this since, of course, the availability of water and the temperature greatly affect the grass and nature that they feed on as herbivores. So, if those factors change negatively, it could lead to their food supply being affected, and they will not be able to survive without these resources. And another impact on them is interspecific competition and interspecific competition. And that will be discussed by the next individual.
Good day everyone. Ako naman si Vince Russell Argobertan at aking i-discuss ang effects of interspecific competition for resources. To recap, interspecific competition is the interaction of two of the same species kung saan nagko-compete sila sa isang resource. At paano nga ba nakakaapekto ang interspecific competition sa mga resources? They have a nearly identical needs for a limited resource where all individuals consume equal amounts until the resource is depleted. Or sa madaling salita, ang pagkakaroon ng same needs ng dalawang same species ay patuloy-tuloy itong nawawalan ng resource over time. According nga kay Mondal at Palit, ang resources have a significant impact on livelihood strategies and are essential for food production and environmental preservation. Ang sinasabi nito na ang resource ay nakakaapekto sa kabuhayan ng isang organism. Kagaya ng sinasabi dito na livelihood strategies na pwede nating i-apply sa mga tao. Halimbawa, may nakatira malapit sa dagat. Siyempre, sila ay mangingisda bilang pangkabuhayan nila. May sinasabi rin dito na essential for food production, na kagaya nga ng na-discuss na ng mga kagrupo ko, na ang resources like soil, water, sunlight, and other abiotic factors ay kinakailangan upang magkaroon ng pagkain. Mayroon ring sinasabing dito na environmental preservation, na sinasabi na ating gamitin ng maayos ang ating resources para hindi masira ang nature. Sa image na ito ay isang halimbawa na kung paano nakakaepekto ang interspecific competition ng dalawang plant species. Pinapakita rito ang pag-compete sa water availability, kung saan nagre-resulta ito sa increase or pagka-decrease ng other resource availability para sa dalawang species na ito. Let us now proceed with the types of interspecific competition. There are two types of interspecific competition, and these are the interference competition and the exploitation competition. Firstly is the interference competition, is where organisms directly prevent competitors from accessing limited resources through aggression, territoriality, or chemical inhibition. We can say that na pinaprevent lang natin ang kalaban natin, kung wari, na makuha nila yung resources na mayroon tayo. Pwede rin nating masabing analogy yung nangyayaring war ng Amerika at ng Iran, kung saan naglalaban sila para mag-compete for power and for land or territory. This image is also an example of interference competition. Itong dalawa ay dalawang male deers or sinasabing buck, na kung saan nagko-compete sila for mates during mating season, or pwede ring sabihin natin naglalaban sila para sa isang territory. Kasunod naman nito ay ang exploitation or scramble competition. It is an indirect interaction between individuals that occurs on same population exploiting the same resources, reducing or depleting a food resource. Ang magandang example dito ay kagaya nung pinakita ko kaninang example na plants, where plants exhibit or a prime example of exploitation competition.
Negative effects on resources. Sa slide na ito, makikita ang negative effects kapag mataas ang population. Una, resource depletion. Habang dumarami ang organisms, mas maraming gumagamit ng parehong resources tulad ng pagkain, tubig, at space. Dahil dito, mas mabilis nauubos ang supply at nagkakaroon ng kakulangan. Ikalawa, unequal resource distribution. Hindi lahat nakakakuha ng sapat na resources. Yung mga dominant o mas malakas na organisms ang kadalasang nakakakuha ng mas marami habang yung iba ay kulang o wala. Kaya ang epekto nito ay competition, kakulangan at posibleng pagbaba ng survival rate ng ibang organisms. Positive effects on resources. Sa slide na ito, makikita naman ang positive effects sa resources. Una, efficient resource use. Natututo ang mga organisms na gamitin ng resources ng mas maayos. Halimbawa ay pag-adapt sa ibang paraan ng pagkain o paggamit ng environment. Ikalawa, prevents overexploitation. Dahil may limit ang resources, hindi pwedeng lumaki ng sobra ang population. Nakakatulong ito para hindi tuluyang maubos ang resources at mapanatili ang balance. Ikatlo, resource partitioning. Hinahati-hati ng organisms ang paggamit ng resources, tulad ng pagkain sa iba't ibang lugar o oras. Para maiwasan ang matinding kompetisyon, ibig sabihin kahit may limitasyon, nagkakaroon pa rin ng stability sa ecosystem. So, next ay conditions, resources, and ecological niche. Sa slide na ito, ipinapaliwanag ang tatlong concepts. Una, conditions. Ito yung mga environmental factors tulad ng temperature, pH, humidity na kayang i-tolerate ng organism para mabuhay. Ikalawa, resources. Ito naman ang mga kailangan ng organism tulad ng pagkain, tubig, liwanag at tirahan para sa survival at reproduction. At ikatlo, ang ecological niche. Ito ang kabuoang role ng organism sa ecosystem. Kasama dito kung saan siya nakatira, anong conditions ang kaya niya, at anong resources ang ginagamit niya. Sa madaling salita, ang niche ang nagde-define kung paano siya nabubuhay at nakikipag-interact sa environment. So next ay ang conditions, yung mga abiotic factors. Sa slide na ito, focus tayo sa abiotic factors o conditions na nakakaapekto sa organisms. Una ay ang sunlight, nagbibigay ng energy para sa photosynthesis kaya mahalaga sa plants. Temperature na nakakaapekto sa metabolic rate at survival ng organisms. Water na kailangan para sa hydration at bilang habitat ng aquatic organisms. Soil na pinanggagalingan ng nutrients at support ng plants, atmosphere na nagbibigay ng oxygen para sa respiration at carbon dioxide para sa photosynthesis, nutrients tulad ng hydrogen at phosphorus na kailangan sa growth, humidity na nakakaapekto sa water loss ng plants at organisms, wind na tumutulong sa pollination at pagkalat ng seeds, pH levels na nakakaapekto sa chemical balance at survival ng organisms, at altitude na nakakaapekto sa temperature, oxygen at level pressure. So lahat ng ito ay nagdedetermine kung anong organisms ang kayang mabuhay sa isang lugar.
So, resources ulit tayo. Pero ngayon naman ay i-differentiate natin ang resources ng autotrophs at heterotrophs. So, alam naman natin yung dalawa. Uli, recap lang. Autotrophs ay gumagamit ng resources tulad ng inorganic materials upang makagawa ng sarili nilang pagkain. Samantala yung heterotrophs ay kumukonsumo ng ibang organismo upang makakuha sila ng food at energy para mabuhay sila. At base dito, meron tayong dalawang types ng autotrophs. So una, ang photoautotrophs. Sila din yung tinatawag nating yung photosynthetic organism na pinag-usapan natin kanina tulad ng plants, algae, cyanobacteria na gumagamit ng pangunahing resource para sa photosynthesis. Kabilang dito yung big four, yung light, carbon dioxide, water, mineral, nutrients, at yung space kung if ever para sa kanilang growth at survival. Tapos pangalawa, ang chemoautotrophs ay mga organismo na katulad ng autotrophs ngunit sa halip na gumagamit ng light energy, kumukuha sila ng energy mula sa pag-oxidize or inorganic substances. Kadalasan sila ay mga bacteria na matatagpuan sa mga lugar na tulad ng deep sea, hydrothermal vents at hot springs. Ito ay dahil mas adapted sila sa extreme environments kung saan kakaunti o walang sunlight. So, next, ngayon naman ay heterotrophs. Sila ang mga organisms na kumukuha ng pagkain sa ibang organisms tulad ng herbivores at carnivores dahil hindi sila kayang gumawa ng sariling pagkain. So, kailangan nila umasa sa iba. May iba't ibang paraan kung paano sila kumukuha ng pagkain. Halimbawa na nandito ang detritivores at decomposers na gumagamit ng dead organic matter bilang kanilang food source. So, kabilang dito yung scavengers, tsaka decomposers na kumakain o nagbe-breakdown ng mga patay na organismo. So, samantala, may mga parasitic heterotrophs naman na umaasa sa host organism. Halimbawa nito ang leech, kuto, at mga endoparasites sa tiyan natin na kumukuha o umaagaw ng nutrients mula sa kanilang host.
Ako si Vinshaw Salga Bertan at akin namang i-discuss ang ecological niche. There are six types of ecological niche, and the first one is the spatial or habitat niche. It is where a species' physical home, such as a certain tree canopy or the forest floor, is referred to as its spatial or habitat niche. Sa madaling salita, kung saan naninirahan ang isang organism. Halimbawa nito ay unggoy at ang baboy ramo. Ang unggoy ay naninirahan mostly ay sa mga puno, habang ang mga baboy ramo naman ay mostly naninirahan sa lupa. Kumbaga, dahil nga sa special niche nila na sa puno at sa lupa, hindi sila nagkakaroon ng agawan sa resources. Secondly is the trophic niche, where it is determined by the species place in the food chain. Sinasabi lang naman dito ay kung anong kinakain ng isang organism at kung ano ang role nila sa isang food chain. Halimbawa nito ay ang lion, ay bilang isang carnivore, kumakain lang sila ng mga hayop. At ang isang halimbawa pa nito ay sa mga cows, isang mga herbivore kung saan kinakain lamang nila ay mga halaman. Pangatlo ay ang multidimensional or hypervolume niche, where it is a complicated, all-encompassing niche that takes into account the pH, humidity, and temperature that a species can withstand. Ang magandang halimbawa dito ay ang mga isda, na alam naman natin na may certain tolerance range sila na kung saan hindi dapat ganun kainit at hindi dapat ganun kalamig ang tubig na kanilang ini-inhabit. Kasunod naman ay ang fundamental niche where the entire spectrum of resources and environmental circumstances that a species may potentially inhabit in the absence of competition is known as its fundamental niche. Next would be the realized niche, where a species' true and more constrained niche as a result of competition, predation, and other biotic constraints is known as its realized niche. And where it was already been or na-discuss na natin sa mga dati pang at mga lectures. Lastly naman ay ang reproductive niche, where it concentrates on the precise time and surroundings needed for production. Na kung saan may certain conditions or lugar na kailangan ang isang species para mag-proceed sila sa reproduction. Halimbawa, ang isda na nangingitog lang sa mga specific na temperature ng waters or bahagi ng ilog sa dagat para mabuhay lang ang mga itlog. Ito naman ay isang halimbawa ng mga ecological niche na nakuha namin sa isang study na nangangalan na Niche Differences in Coexisting Species: Ecological Insights into the Role of Activity Patterns, Space Use, and Environmental Preferences, made by Reyes Puig et al. It mainly focuses on the Timon lepidus or the ocellated lizard and the Lacertus riberi or the Iberian emerald lizard. These lizard species that coexist in northern Portugal, where the T. lepidus preferred drier or rocky semi-arid areas, whereas the L. shryberi were predominantly found in humid environments with abundant surroundings of vegetation. Another niche they exhibited would be the differences in body size, wherein the T. lepidus was quite larger than the L. shryberi. It was also observed that the T. lepidus is active during middays at all three seasons, while the L. shryberi showed a pattern of activity centered mainly in the afternoon for a short period and are not as active as the other species. Ang image na ito ay pinapakita yung activity patterns ng Timon lepidus na represented by blue line at ng Lacerta shryberi na pinapakita sa green line. Kita naman dito sa image na ito na ang Timon lepidus ay mostly active during umaga hanggang hanggang kalagitnaan ng hapon or bago maggabi. Kita naman dito na nag-peak sila sa tanghali ng oras habang ang Lacerta shryberi sa green line na ito pinapakita na mas nagiging active sila sa tanghali hanggang sa hapon bago ito mag-decline ng bago maggabi.
Okay, so to support our topic, we found a journal article entitled Relationships Between Abiotic Factors, Foliage Chemistry, and Herbivory in a Tropical Mountain Ecosystem. The authors being Alejandro de la Fuente, Kara N. Youngentub, Karen J. Marsh, Andrew K. Krakenberger, Stephen E. Williams, and Lucas A. Cernusak. So the article explains that herbivory and plant interactions shape ecosystems and are strongly influenced by abiotic environmental conditions like climate, geology, temperature, and precipitation. So these factors affect resource availability, plant chemistry, and herbivore activity. Connecting to the idea that environmental conditions control how organisms survive, grow, and interact, rather than being consumed as resources. So according to study, conditions are different from resources because organisms are not able to consume conditions. But at the same time, according din sa study na to, and according din sa topic namin, ang condition at resources ay magkaugnay because conditions affect resources in different ways. So, katulad na lamang yung sa nabanggit sa article na to. So, nakakaapekto ang conditions like climate, geology, temperature, and precipitation. And lahat ng factor na yun ay nakakaapekto siya sa resource availability ng bawat organism, plant chemistry, or chemistry ng bawat autotrophs and herbivore activities. So, since lahat yan ay magkakonnect dahil ang conditions ay nakakaapekto sa environment ng bawat organism and even their own resources. It also highlights that organisms have tolerance ranges for these conditions and how it influences species distribution and ecosystem stability. So, alam naman din natin na ang conditions like different pH level, water sources, ay nakaka-apekto sa distribution ng bawat species. So, for example na lang, according din sa topic namin, yung sa heterotrophs and resources, so may mga different heterotrophs na nagmamigrate or nag-diverge into a different species because of lack of resources and even different factors ng conditions like maulan or even yung mga different climates. So, the different methods used in this research is the article studied how abiotic factors affect plant chemistry and insect herbivory using field sampling, lab analysis, statistical modeling across environmental gradients. So, una pa lang is nag-set up ang researchers ng sites sa Australian wet tropics ng 25 study sites. So, nakakolekta sila ng different climate, soil nutrients, and plant data. So, doon nila ginamit yung field sampling. So, after nila makolekta lahat ng samples nila, gumamit sila ng lab analysis. So, in-examine nila lahat ng sample na nakolekt nila. Then next is the statistical modeling across environmental gradients. So, after analyzing the leaf chemistry and measuring herbivory and from leaf damage, they analyzed leaf chemistry and measured herbivory from leaf damage. Then they used Bayesian statistical models. And it was used to examine how climate, soil nutrients, and plant chemistry and herbivory are connected. So, ginamit nila yung different methods to connect each other or the different conditions sa bawat organism or sa bawat organisms present sa site na pinagkuhaan nila ng sample.
Now that we already know what is the method used in the study, let us determine what are the key findings of it. The first one is that temperature, rainfall, and geology have stronger and more consistent effects on soil nutrients, plant chemistry, and insect herbivory than individual soil nutrients. Ibig sabihin nito na mas malaki ang epekto sa ecosystem lang large environmental factors tulad ng mga climate at yung nabanggit kanina ng mga geology. Din kasi mga temperature at rainfall ay pwede silang mag-cause na mabago ang process ng mga nutrient cycling, yung mga soil formation at plant growth. Sa geological naman, siya yung nagsasabi kung anong amount pa ng mineral ang available sa lupa. Next naman ay ang higher temperature increases herbivory and influence soil quality. Kasi pag warm yung condition, tumataas ang metabolic rates ng mga insects. Pag mataas ang metabolic rates then mataas din yung activities nila. So then, since madami silang ginagawa, magugutom sila agad. Pag nagutom na sila, need nila kumain para sa energy, then kakainin nila yung plants, then tataas ang herbivory. Pag warm yung condition, gumaganda din yung soil quality in a way na ang mga microbial activity sa lupa ay dumarami. Pwede silang mag-release ng mga nutrients and phosphorus yung mga nitrogen na naturo ng nitrogen cycling na makaka-epekto or makaka-influence sa lupa. Cooler high elevation increase reduce microbial activities and plant growth. Based nga rin sa sinabi ko kanina, mas active ang microbial activity pag warm condition compare here sa cooler. Since hindi masyadong active ang mga soil microbes, konti lang yung nutrients na marirelease nila, so hihina ang growth ng halaman. Next naman is rainfall affects soil nutrients. In here, pwede siyang maging in a good way and a bad one. Sa good way, makatutulong ang rainfall para ma-dissolve ang nutrients from soil to water, then ma-absorb agad ng halaman. However, too much rainfall kasi pwede siya mag-cause ng leaching. Geology strongly determines nutrient level since yung mga rocks have minerals and nutrients. Pag nagwe-weathering, magre-release yon. Some rocks have higher amounts ng nutrients, kaya different areas with different substrate can have different nutrients level. Overall, sa ating key findings that yung result shows that climate is a key driver shaping soil condition, plant chemistry, and herbivory across ecosystem. Next naman ay alamin naman natin kung ano nga ba yung mga naging results ng ating study. For our first result, sinasabi rito na yun nga mga na-absorb na nutrients from lupa ay nakatutulong sa leaf chemistry, pero hindi siya consistent. Kasi yung mga rocks kung saan nakastored ang ilang nutrients ay pwedeng maka-apekto kung paano yung nutrients ay marirelease or ma-absorb. Yung relationship ng soil at leaf chemistry ay complex, especially pag merong geology na involved. So, second naman ay based sa nakuhang data na mababa talaga yung herbivory, ibig sabihin, konti lang ang nakakaing halaman. Pero, consistent pa rin na may epekto ang warmer condition sa pagtaas ng herbivory dahil active ang mga insect pag warm. Ectothermic kasi sila. For the third result, it indicates that different plant species responded differently to environmental conditions. The Alpitonia is more attractive to insect due to its higher nitrogen content. Meanwhile, Plinderesia is just balanced in carbon and nitrogen content. Lastly, as I said earlier sa key findings, herbivory is shaped by interacting abiotic and soil processes rather than a single factors. For our conclusions, herbivore plant interaction are shaped not only by resource availability but also by broader climate, geology, and by geochemical processes. Yung mga factors na yon ay not directly affect herbivory. Those factors influence them by soil nutrients and leaf chemistry and species responses. Aside from that, herbivory can also be affected by plant community itself at plant visibility. Overall, herbivory is driven by both environmental conditions and indirect ecological pathways. Ang ating implications naman ay ang mga physical condition can directly affect resource availability. Soil nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus are influenced by climate and geology, and herbivory can increase with higher temperature and higher foliar nitrogen kung saan ang abiotic factors can affect plant first, then us na mga consumer. Environmental conditions determine where species can live, while resource availability shapes how they function, highlighting different ecological niches among species.